So we've been looking at different ideas of like how in cities can we as architects try to sort of create some form of synergy. One of the ideas is something we call architectural alchemy. The idea that by mixing different traditional ingredients, you can actually create, if not gold, then added value. One of the first examples was the mountain in Copenhagen, where we essentially combined an apartment building and a parking structure. The apartments become this sort of mountain of houses with gardens, almost like a suburban lifestyle, where your kids can run out and play, but you also have a penthouse view, and you're in the middle of the city. And these apartments are lifted on top of a big parking structure. Since the facade, you have like a single funicular elevator that gives access to all the apartments. And the facade is made of a perforated aluminum plate that allows the parking to be naturally ventilated and get daylight. And by simply varying the hole size into 6 different sizes of holes, the holes look dark on the bright aluminum. We could transform the entire urban facade into a gigantic urban artwork for free. So essentially, again, this sort of the perforation, the sort of image, Japanese photographer gave us this image of Mount Everest. It's actually also what allows the parking to breathe. This sort of idea of like mixing different sort of ingredients that you would normally keep separate and like exploring the potential of what happens when you actually combine things in an unusual way. We pursued further with the same client, this project that's really at the city limits of Copenhagen. The lake is where the city stops. It's a new part of town. And essentially, the main idea is instead of like when you're doing a new town from scratch, how do you impregnate it with the diversity of historical city? Well, what you typically do in Denmark is that you sort of you put on different facades to make it sort of look interesting, even though it's all the same apartments inside. We thought, like, what about exploring real diversity? You know, we put the shops and offices on the ground. They want to be close to the customers. On top, we add a layer of apartments, but because residential space is less deep than commercial space, we get a small path with gardens, so it becomes like this sort of neighborhood of townhouses. Then we add a layer of apartments, and then what you could call sort of penthouse row houses. Finally, the city asks for a shortcut through the block, so we turn it into a big figure 8, sort of connecting the two sides, creating these little plazas. And finally, shops and offices, they like to be close to the customers. They like daylight, but they hate sunshine. So to the south, we sort of push them down. To the north, we create a 4-story office building. In reverse, that also lifts up the apartments into the sun and the view. And in reverse, we sort of pull down the southwest corner to open up the courtyard for the daylight and the views over the park to the south. So essentially, this sort of short circuit suddenly sort of reconnects the path in front of the townhouses, and it becomes this sort of basically, like you can see, like it is really at the city limits of Copenhagen. You have this sort of clash of life forms. But more importantly, what happens is that you can say the idea of architectural alchemy doesn't only allow us to sort of optimize the conditions for the individual programs, you know, leave the ground for the shops, lift the townhouses up on top of the offices into the sun and the view, but it also allows for the possibility for spontaneous social encounters that are traditionally restricted to occurring at the street. They're actually sort of lifted up into the three-dimensional space of the block. So the 8 house isn't just you know, like a facade design or an expressive building sculpture. It's really a three-dimensional urban condition that carves out niches for public life throughout the three-dimensional space of the city. So essentially, like this, you can say like it almost becomes a sort of hybrid between architecture and landscape, or like a man-made addition to the very flat topography of Copenhagen. One of the things, you know, where the 8 house sort of intersects itself, we took out all of the floors and created this sort of vertical tower where all the amenities are connected with sort of ricocheting stair that connects from the ground all the way up to a shared roof terrace. And you can say, like, this idea was mostly to sort of create possibilities for the people living there. You know, there's a sociological survey from the 70s that concludes that children living higher than the 3rd floor rarely come down and play. Here you can actually sort of, even though you're living on the 10th floor, you can actually like bicycle or like stroll down and visit your neighbors. But what also happened, you can see this is how flat Copenhagen is. There is no place in Copenhagen where you can go and enjoy the view of your city. So people actually come here suddenly and go for a walk, you know, with holding their girlfriend in the hand and sort of admiring their city, because it's really become sort of an extension to the sort of natural geography of Copenhagen. And the general idea is this idea of synergy, that the facades for the offices becomes the handrails for the path, the actual handrail becomes the street lights, so each function sort of assists the other one. So this sort of idea of trying to explore and exploit the synergy between different programs, you can also do sort of as an afterthought. We got invited to look at a project in Basel, an invited competition. It's this area called Dreispitz, where they have the Volta part of the Art Basel fair. It's becoming this new creative neighborhood. And you see this big warehouse. They wanted to convert it into sort of a mixture of like restaurants, cafes, spaces for working and spaces for living, and then adding a layer of residential on top, because the building is so well built, so strong. It can actually carry, it's like Swiss craftsmanship, it can carry 3 more floors. The problem is, and they wanted that to be residential, the problem is that it's simply too deep for residential. You're going to have too great distances between the windows. So we tried to sort of solve it, and we looked at maybe considering it 5 individual buildings instead, and by gently rotating them, suddenly we get light from 4 sides instead of just light from 2 sides. We do this in a way that completely aligns, even though it's rotated, it completely aligns with the existing structure. So as you can say, it's like the same grid, the same geometry that can be interpreted in 2 different ways. Simply we sort of extend the ends to align with the geometry of the warehouse. We sort of maximize daylight. We also punch holes, so you get these daylight deep into the floor plan of the existing building, and you get this sort of gardens for the tenants that sort of sit on top of the old warehouse. So this sort of city-stack structure resting on top of the old warehouse is really this sort of unusual combination of 2 completely different architectures, although they're actually sort of informed by the same structure and the same geometry. So you say, like, as an idea, we're taking the traditional courtyard building where the courtyard is sort of incarcerated at the heart of the block, and we turn it inside out, so you get this sort of almost like a penthouse for the people that you, like from the courtyard, you can sort of meet your neighbors, and you can also enjoy the view of the surrounding cities. Another sort of element that's been sneaking up in our work is that you see, like, all of the projects I've shown so far are actually private developments made by private developers, but because they are part of the city, they somehow attempt to contribute to the sort of the public landscape. The mountain becomes this sort of part of the sort of the image of Copenhagen. The ape house, you can actually stroll and explore the spaces inside the block.